Come on, guys, we could just get out of here, the little ghost monster moaned, floating above his cousins, all three trapped inside a dingy dungeon cell. We can't just leave, protested the tallest of the three, a gorgeous puppet man with luscious black hair and a pink dancing dress that showed off his fabulous legs.
Do you have any idea how long it took us to get these perfect bodies? Said the third companion, another puppet in the form of a cat girl with pink hair. Her dancing dress matched her cousin's, but in a tutu shape. Of course you do. You saw when we got them. The only one of us who didn't want a body was you.
Come on, Mettaton, Mew Mew. Are you two really going to stick around with those bodies if they choose to kill you? The little ghost moaned.
Yes!
Both of the puppets shouted. You couldn't understand. This body is me. If it were destroyed without me in it, I'd simply die of heartbreak. Can't go back to being a box on a wheel. I simply can't. Mettaton droned on.
And I finally have the perfect face and the perfect eyes and the cute tail. And this body doesn't smell like the old mildew like my last one did.
Mew Mew wept. The little ghost rolled his eyes, not sure what he could say to get his cousins to preserve themselves.
Will you freaks please shut up and let us contemplate our deaths in peace?
Said a scraggly human in the cell across from them. Well, how were we supposed to know that street performances were illegal? No wonder these humans have no joy in their lives. Mettaton folded his arms.
Honestly, we should have stayed in Edenfall,
Mew Mew cried.
Don't you think killing folks for such a simple mistake is awfully extreme?
Shut up, for God's sake, someone shouted a few cells down. The possessed puppets both sighed, leaning against the stone walls, neither wanting to get their beautiful dresses dirty on the filthy floor. After a few moments, something slowly rose in the silence. Screams? Outside? In the dead of night? There sounded like a struggle was underway on the floor above them. What the devil could be going on? Said Mettaton.
Blukey, you want to get out of here so badly. Why don't you see what's going on upstairs? Said Mew Mew.
I'm really not feeling like it, but fine, said the ghost. As the loot he was carrying and the feathered hat he wore fell through his body, the ghost floated up and passed through the ceiling. As his head rose from the ground, the sound of screaming and clashing blades blasted into his ears. Quickly, he ducked away before someone stepped on him. So frightened, as the bodies fell and blood spilled around him, Napstablook shot up into the air to get a better look around. He'd risen up in the gallows square attached to the royal palace. A mob of townsfolk with knives and pitchforks were overwhelming the palace guards. Oh no, it's a siege, the ghost whined, trying to return underground. He shed tears of panic, trying to dodge around the angry townsfolk and dive back into the dirt. He appeared in the hall between the cells, all prisoners now standing and looking up at the noise.
Blukey, what did you see?
Said Mew Mew, clinging to the bars. Oh, it's a revolt. People are really upset, whined the ghost. Just then, the sound of the dungeon door opened. Release the prisoners! Release them all! The voices shouted. Napstablook shook as he saw men around the corner before quickly darting back into the cell with his cousins. The prisoners started to shout in glee, each begging to be released, as city folk ran in, breaking the locks with axes and hammers. Hey, let us go too! We didn't do anything wrong, said Mettaton, also throwing himself at the bars. Yeah, pretty boy, everyone's getting out, said a gruff man with a beard. A large hammer in hand, he slammed the steel into the iron bars several times until the lock broke free.
Yippee! Freedom!
Mew Mew shouted, running out as she giggled. Finally, let's get out of here. It's smelling worse by the second, said Mettaton, trying to avoid the grungy humans running past. Napstablook picked up his hat and loot before following his cousins to the stairs and out to the open air. The wind was full of smoke. Hundreds of torches pierced the night. City folk were raiding the palace and surrounding the gallows. As some people were lifting the guillotine, others were dragging captured guards and nobles to meet their slaughter on public display. Heavens, let's get out of this grisly place! Mettaton covered his mouth.
Huh? Why? I want to watch, said Mew Mew. Besides, we don't have any money or any place to be.
Nope, we're leaving. Mettaton lifted Mew Mew up with his metal arms, carrying her over his head and through the mob.
Hey, no, put me down!
Mew Mew wailed and hissed. Napstablook thought leaving was the best idea as well. He had no taste to watch people get killed. It was good that they were free, but the guards had taken all their money. Guys, how are we going to get any food or a place to stay? Finally, Mettaton set Mew Mew down as they got to the street, watching the chaos at a mostly safe distance. Her hair standing on end, Mew Mew licked the back of her hands and began to groom herself. Not that she had any saliva, given she was a puppet. Well, how am I supposed to know? I suppose we'll have to perform or beg for some. Maybe we can get away with it now since the gods are occupied. Mettaton put his hands on his hips. No offense, but I don't think anyone wants to see a performance right now. Everyone seems so murdery at the moment. As Napstablook spoke, he looked past his cousins where a few strange characters stood out from the crowd, nearly as strange as them. He first noticed the very tall man, or rather skeleton, dressed in heavy dark armor with long horns. Atop his shoulder was another skeleton, much smaller, that he was easy to carry, but he wore dark robes, and his whole body was covered in some kind of violet darkness. Did someone say murder? The small skeleton asked with a smirk. To either side of them were 3 more skeletons, a knightly-looking monster, an assassin type with his face covered, and a rogue with high white boots and a target-shaped soul hanging off his chest. Mettaton and Mew Mew turned, the cat girl scoffing, "Who the heck are you guys?" The dark skeleton put a hand to his chest, giving a bow of his head. "I'm Nightmare, the dark guardian of the sacred tree of Edenfall. It's good to see fellow members of my kind and that none of you are hurt." "Oh, what? You mean you're Nightmare? Said Mettaton, his eyes widening. "Dream's brother? The one who went missing 4 years ago?" said Mew Mew, equally shocked. "That I am," Nightmare nodded. "I have come to bring justice against those who harmed my brother and me, and to bring relief and prosperity to the masses." Mettaton and Mew Mew both seemed starstruck by the presence of the Dark Guardian, but Napstablook wasn't so sure. The little ghost tilted his brow as both his cousins stumbled over each other, hitting the party of skeletons with a dozen questions. As Nightmare smiled and gave a gentle chuckle, something about this didn't sit right with the little ghost. "Please, my friends, all your questions will be answered in due time. But for now, I have my flock to tend to. But please, do stick around. I assure you it would be worthwhile to see history in the making," said Nightmare. With that, the giant knight skeleton walked on towards the crowd, continuing to carry the Dark Guardian with him. The roguish and assassin type followed them. "Hey, I recognize you," said the knightly skeleton with a black cape and fur collar. He smiled, putting a hand to his chin. The ghost felt he lacked the threatening aura of the other 4 skeletons. "Mettaton and Mew Mew and Napstablook, right?" "Oh my, you recognize us?" Mettaton gasped, hands to his face. "Darling, I think we met our first fan in this awful city." "No way! And I thought we only had fans in Edenfall!" Mew Mew's ears twitched with delight. The skeleton gave a soft chuckle, despite the bloody conflict happening all around them. "Yeah, I'm a big fan. My name is Cross. It's nice to finally meet you in person. I'm surprised to see you here in the middle of a riot. It can't be safe." "Oh no, they captured us and brought us here and took all our money!" Mew Mew whined, tears coming to her eyes. "And we worked so hard to make it here. All we wanted was to bring joy to the gloomy folks of Rivaldo." Mettaton dramatically covered his face with an arm, seeming to weep as well. "Oh no, that's awful. You probably need some money to get by then. Here, take my bag," said the knight, pulling out a heavy coin purse from his belt. "What's this? Wait, this isn't all your money, is it?" said Mettaton, taking it. Mew Mew leaned over her cousin's arm as they both looked into the bag. Sparkling gold coins glittered back at them. "Nah, it's not a problem. I can get more. I don't need it to be tonight anyway," Cross waved. "But I'd love to see you do a show soon. I hope you'll stick around till after everything calms down." "No way! Oh, what a noble knight! You swoon me so!" Mettaton wheezed, his eyes turning to hearts. "He's rescued us by such a generous donation! Oh, Sir Cross!" Mew Mew purred. "Please, it's no big deal," Cross held up his hands. "The 3 of you should find safety. If you can, track me down later. We plan on reopening the abandoned university, so I'll likely be there. Be careful." As Cross went to follow his other companions, Napstablook looked on where the palace began to catch fire. It was such an oddly pleasant interaction, despite the chaos being unleashed. "Come on, let's go find an inn. I need to clean my poor dress and get a catnap," said Mew Mew. "Agreed. All this stress has me in desperate need of my beauty sleep," said Mettaton. As his cousins headed away from the riot, Napstablook lingered just a little longer, watching the terror unfold. Seeing the humans cheer at such bloodlust, how could they be so happy to do such awful things? And why Nightmare had returned to stoke it, he couldn't understand. The Spectre family performers, that's what they called themselves, would find an inn away from the discourse. Luckily, the place they found also had a stage where they asked if they could perform for the next few days. The innkeeper seemed unsure about it at first, letting three strange monsters put on a show in his establishment. But by the way things were going, he figured any guards still serving the monarchy would be way too busy to stop them. The novelty of the specters drew in a large crowd. More than ever, the people of Rivalda wanted to see what these monsters were about. And there was gold. Gold overflowing from the hands of patrons ready to spend. Days before, the city was in the worst economic crisis it had ever seen in recorded history. Peasants were starving, the streets were filthy, disease ran rapid. However, upon Nightmare's arrival, the strange dark skeleton was handing out bags full of gold to those in most need of it. The city was in a frenzy, buying up food and wine and celebrating in the streets. Everyone knew of the reverent guardians who once protected the healing tree to the north. They also heard about the felling of the tree 4 years prior. And so, for Nightmare to come to their city, returning with the gift of revolution, pledges of alliance and eternal gratitude were being sung in the skeleton's name. Mettaton and Mew Mew seemed to be catching on to the fever of it. They figured if they leaned into it, wrote songs about the savior Nightmare who'd come to rescue Rivaldo, their audience of new human fans would go mad for it. And boy, did the humans eat it up. When Napstablook would go do a nightly float around the streets, he could hear drunk humans repeating the lyrics his cousins had written. Beware ye noble gentlemen, beware ye kings and queens, for the greatest nightmare has arrived, and to your doom he brings. Though he was glad everyone was having so much fun, the little ghost couldn't shake how morbid it seemed. Over the past few days, Napstablook spotted many of the humans carrying a strange blue booklet around with them. For those who could read, they stood in the streets reading aloud the contents of the book as crowds gathered around. He'd seen many of the inn patrons carrying the blue books, and eventually one would land in the hands of Mettaton. The three of them looked over it one night after a show. Gold letters printed on the front read, The Celestial Doctrine. Human souls are impure, unlike monster souls, Mew Mew read as she sat on her bed, dressed down in a simple but very pink nightgown. It is the purity of monster souls which is why their souls do not persist after death. Their essence returns quickly to the roots of the world tree, to an afterlife of bliss. But human souls are unclean. It is the soul traits that give them color and causes them to linger after death. They do not see the paradise that waits beyond until they denounce the traits that make them so cruel. They shall be tormented until they have become clean. Is that true? Mettaton asked, sitting at his vanity, brushing his long black hair. I never knew that about monster and human souls. Napstablook gently tuned his lute on his own bed, looking at the others. I don't know. I don't really like how it describes humans and monsters. It makes monsters sound like they're better than humans. To be fair, humans are awfully violent. They can cause so much trouble just to themselves, said Mew Mew, a hand to her hip, before she looked back at the book. I mean, if Nightmare did write this, he is one of the guardians of the sacred tree. He would know how souls work better than any of us. What reason would he have to lie about it? Mettaton smiled as he gathered his hair up in a bun. Exactly. I don't think he means any ill will by it. He came to help the humans just like we did. If it's true, that's what he should say. Mew Mew nodded in agreement. Napstablook was outnumbered on this, but he was also struggling to convey how he felt about it. Recently, there was something Napstablook remembered from 4 years ago. Asgore's court mage, Casilda the Red, had been murdered. Though the investigation was being kept from the public, Napstablook had a pen pal who had been close to the situation. She confessed to him that it was Nightmare who killed Casilda. A warrant was out for his arrest, but none of the guards or Asgore's agents could find him. Napstablook promised his friend he wouldn't tell anyone about the investigation, but even if he could tell his cousins, he didn't think they'd believe him. Or if they did believe him, they were likely to just make an excuse on Nightmare's behalf. I should write a letter to Hood, let her know how things are going, said Napstablook, floating over to the writing desk. Oh, you're going to write a love letter to your girlfriend? Mew Mew bounced up and down on her bed. Come on, guys, don't tease me. She's just a friend, I swear, the little ghost whined. Oh yes, tell her about our new show. Mettaton looked over, beaming a smile. Let her know Rivaldo is hopping with excitement since that awful king was disposed. The humans want to know so much about monsters, you should invite her to visit. Maybe I should, Napstablook mumbled. As more of the blue books started showing up, notices were posted throughout the town bulletin boards. Napstablook's eyes caught one as he wandered about the next night. The ads requested anyone who could read and was willing to teach to come to the university to be interviewed by Nightmare. He listed a hefty sum of gold as salary, in which the celestial doctrine was to be used to help increase the literacy of the city folk. It reminded the ghost about the skeleton named Cross who asked them to come find him. At the very least, he seemed nice. It would be the right thing to thank him and offer to repay what he'd given them. Finally taking a day off from the week-long shows, the specters dressed up in brand-new clothes. Though Napstablook knew them to wear very flashy colors with gold accessories, this time their outfits seemed fairly tame. Though Mettaton still had a fabulous ascot, he settled for a dark blue velvet vest with black heels. Mew Mew also dressed in a flowy peach dress with accompanying parasol, though it was a modest length and neckline. Given the recent events, looking too noble-like or out of touch seemed distasteful. The more reserved outfits helped them blend in. It seemed out of character, but Napstablook's two cousins were taking to heart the evolving culture of Rivaldo. Strolling up to the university gate, though the guards wore a mix of borrowed armor and uniforms, they had a stern, determined look in their eyes. No doubt Nightmare was paying them better than their previous lord ever had. Good morning, gentlemen, Mettaton beamed his winning smile. We are the Spectre family performers, and several nights ago we were invited to visit by the lovely young man named Cross. Would he happen to be here today? You want to talk to Sir Cross? Yeah, he's here, said an older man with a scraggly beard. What's your business with him? He insisted on seeing us perform, of course, Mew Mew chirped. We haven't seen him come by the inn we've been booked in, so we thought perhaps he'd enjoy a private demonstration. The guard looked at his companions, tilting a brow. All right, I'll let him know you're here. Even though they were at the gate itself was actually swung wide open. Citizens came to and from as they pleased, discussing what they were learning from the free classes that were being hosted. It just seemed logical to ask the guards directly about Cross rather than roaming around the vast halls of the massive school. Though they had to wait a long while, they were accompanied by a conversation with fans who recognized them. Several young ladies asked for autographs from Mettaton and Mew Mew on the pages of their homework. Hey guys, it's so good to see you, said Cross, the skeleton now wearing a sleek black tunic. I'm really glad you all decided to stay. I heard your performances are going well. They're magnificent, darling, all thanks to you, Mettaton smiled. We brought back your coin purse, and with the right amount you gave us, said Mew Mew, reaching into her purse. Please, there's no need to repay me, Cross held up his hands. Whatever I need, Nightmare provides. Speaking of Nightmare, I told him about you three. He'd love to meet with you. Would you join us for tea? He's having a break in the observation tower with his companions. We would love some tea, Mew Mew and Mettaton said at once. Napstablook continued to listen quietly as the conversation unfolded. Though none of them would have been exhausted by taking the stairs, Cross would introduce them to an ingenious iron lift at the base of the university's tallest tower. Napstablook was a bit baffled by it at first, panicking as the floor lifted and threatened to pass through him. Luckily, Mew Mew caught him before he was left in the cavity of the elevator. On the top floor, the observation tower had been converted into a large living space. Those 6 balconies still held heavy steel telescopes. Folded dividers sectioned off part of the room into private areas. Blue and purple tapestries hung from the domed ceiling, embroidered with constellations. As they came off the lift, they could see a dining table set up at the center of the room. It was piled mainly with books and papers, but scattered around it were small plates of desserts and a silver tray of fresh tea. Nightmare sat at the end of the table as the assassin-dressed skeleton handed him a teacup and a saucer. The rogue-looking skeleton with an exposed soul turned around, throwing an arm over the back of his chair. Heh, they're dressed better than I thought they'd be. Pardon me, Mettaton stood up straight, a hand to his chest. We're always dressed according to the latest fashion. Yeah, we got pride, you know, Mew Mew huffed. Now, Killer, mind your manners, Nightmare hummed as he stood. Please, my friends, take a seat. I'd like to hear from you how the people of Rivaldo are weathering these changing times. There was the sound of wood skirting across stone. Looking over, the giant skeleton was there too, wearing a tunic just like Cross's. Without his armor, the three could see he had a broken skull and a red eye. Sorry, didn't mean to scare you, he said, as he was dragging over a few more chairs to the table. It was the cracked skull skeleton that would help each into their chair before the assassin type poured them each a cup of tea. Oh, we should introduce ourselves, Nightmare nodded as he sat back down. We're all familiar with you three, Mettaton, Mew Mew, and Napstablook, and you already know Cross. The dark skeleton looked to the rogue on his left. Now that they were a little closer, Napstablook noticed how he didn't have eyelights like the others. He was fiddling with a small blade in his hand, picking between the joints of his fingers with the edge of the blade. Heh, I go by Killer. It ain't exactly subtle, if you know what I mean, he grinned. Before the three of them could internalize his meaning, the tallest skeleton spoke up. I'm Horror, and the quiet one is Dust. He doesn't talk much, he said, nodding at the hooded figure. Would you like some strawberry shortcake? I made it myself. Horror seemed fitting. The way the big skeleton smiled, his grin was thinner than the others and appeared to have several extra teeth. I love strawberry shortcake, yes, please, said Mew Mew with a purr after setting her parasol next to her. Mettaton nodded in agreement. Soon the three of them had a small plate of cake to accompany their tea. Do tell how your stay in Rivaldo has been going, said Nightmare, taking a sip from his cup. Well, aside from that dreadful first night in the dungeon, things have been going well, said Mettaton. You appear to be making some really great changes around here. Everyone seems so excited and open to new ideas. The dark skeleton beamed a smile. Despite the strange feeling Napstablook felt about this whole scenario, Nightmare did seem genuinely pleased by recent events. That's wonderful to hear. 4 years ago, when I escaped Rivaldo, this place had been so dreadful. But since my power has increased, I've always wanted to return to help the people here. I've been so restless after losing Dream. I know he'd be proud of the work we're doing. Oh, yes, your brother. We're so sorry that happened to you. Mew Mew frowned, her ears going down. I couldn't imagine losing one of my cousins that way. They said you're both immortal, but 500 years? That must be an eternity to wait to see your loved one again. The Nightmare was still smiling, his cheekbones sank, his voice growing more somber. Yes, it is. I miss him dearly with each passing day. But that's why I'm here. I think the only way I can keep the pain from consuming me is to do good things while he's gone. I want this world to be a better place when he wakes up. I want to build something we can all be proud of and the people can pass on to their descendants. Everyone seemed to take a moment of silence. Even Killer stopped fidgeting with his knife. Nightmare lifted his head, trying to bring up the mood. Well, that's why I wanted to meet you three. You have a dedicated audience in Edenfall, so why did you decide to come here? Well, we heard about how the people of Rivaldo are always so depressed. The people couldn't afford good entertainment, said Mettaton. We came because we wanted to spread joy and celebration throughout the world. It did seem right to keep it all to ourselves in Edenfall. The culture back home is already so exuberant. We wanted to see if we could find folks who needed to have their spirits lifted, said Mew Mew. Ah, I thought so. I would have expected such noble intentions, Nightmare nodded. How would you like the opportunity to do much more than just performing shows? I need help building up a new culture that the humans will enjoy. Something that will lift their spirits and bring them a future worth believing in. The three of you work so closely with them. I was hoping you'd have ideas about what they'd gravitate towards. Holidays, traditions, festivals, customs. I would like to find a way to standardize these things so they could be taught and celebrated universally. You want our help created holidays and festivals for the humans? Mettaton's eyes widened. That sounds exciting, but also a lot of work, said Mew Mew. I'd be more than happy to pay you a salary for the work, appointing the three of you as my cultural directors. Name your price, whatever it is you need, said Nightmare as he folded his fingers together, leaning back in his chair. That sounds magnificent. Did you hear that, cousin? We could help a new culture take shape, Mettaton said to Mew Mew. As they were chatting, Napstablook took a bite of his cake. It tasted really good, not too sweet, and where had they gotten fresh strawberries this time of year? Oh, I'm not really good at managing something like that. I can just play instruments, he moaned, not really wanting the Dark Guardian to have expectations of him higher than he could deliver.
Don't sell yourself short, Blukey, said Mew Mew. Since you never opted into having a body, you can float around anywhere you please. You always have a great insight on how the crowd is feeling.
Is that so? Said Nightmare, his gaze focusing on the little ghost. He felt a shiver in his plasma. That violet eye giving him full attention was something he'd been avoiding. I could just hear people say things when they don't think other people are listening. I can't actually read people's feelings very well. Sorry. Oh, that's quite all right. I'm sure we can work something out, said Nightmare, tilting his head with a smile. Napsiplik held his breath until the dark skeleton finally looked away. As Crost asked his cousins questions about their show, the conversation continued on without him. Avoiding looking at Nightmare again, the little ghost felt unsure about what his companions were getting themselves into. A little over an hour of conversation, Nightmare agreed to write up a contract for the performers to do work for him, along with an agreed price. He told them he'd have the contract sent to their place of residence once he had it formalized. Satisfied with their visit, the ghost and two puppets took the lift back down to the ground floor. Without hesitation, Nightmare was already writing out clauses for the contracts, figuring out the details carefully. Horror and Dust had already excused themselves from the table to work on maintaining their equipment. Crost had followed their guests to the lift to say goodbye, while Killer stood before leaning over Nightmare's chair, his head over the Guardian's shoulder. Geez, boss, you don't ever take a break. Didn't I just have a break with tea and cake? Nightmare looked at him, but didn't turn his head.
That was more of a business meeting. That doesn't count.
Gripping Nightmare's shoulders, Killer started to massage them, which suddenly put a block on Nightmare's ability to write.
We should take a trip somewhere nice, somewhere Dust would like. I overheard him and Horror talking the other night. It's his birthday today,
Killer whispered into his ear. Over the past 2 years, Nightmare had grown used to the others touching him. The 5 skeletons had a closer bond than most found families. Killer, especially, had been clinging ever closer. He hadn't realized how much his bones ached until Killer started rubbing them. Setting the feather pen aside, Nightmare closed his eyes and leaned into the pressure. Well, when you say it like that... Cross had turned back and blinked, awkwardly shifting his gaze away. Killer, you really should let Nightmare continue his work. It's very important.
But taking breaks is important too, Crossy,
said Killer, standing up and walking over to the knight.
But I doubt you'd understand. Both of you are workaholics.
Tilting his brow, Cross leaned his face closer to Killer's, both skeletons grinning deviously. Is that so? Well, what's your idea of a break, then?
I want to go to an arcade.
Killer's sockets widened as he whipped around, leaning against the table.
Listen, Dust loves games, right? It would be a perfect place to have his birthday.
True, but Dust also doesn't like loud noises and flashing lights, said Nightmare. Maybe we take him to a carnival. Wait, that might not be much better, would it? Said Cross, a hand to his chin. The 3 of them sighed, all thinking about what their most reclusive companion might actually enjoy.
He is so hard to read,
Killer begrudged. Hey, what if we just asked Horror? Cross said. He is the closest one to Dust. We can hear you, you know, said Horror past one of the dividers. So much for a surprise, Dust mumbled, coming back into view, folding his arms as Horror was right behind him.
Right, I forgot you guys are still here. Damn, you two are quiet as hell,
Killer groaned. It's my birthday, and as such I have a few demands, said Dust, coming to Nightmare's other side. The Dark Guardian and Killer both raised their brows at each other. It was a rare moment that they'd see the hooded skeleton be so assertive. He has demands. Very well, what are your demands, Dust? Said Nightmare. First of all, I want to go to Seoul and have some genuine street food. Then we can go to an arcade. Make it a weekday so we don't have to deal with any kids. Then I want to ride motorcycles down the Han River to the sea and end the night at the beach with beers. You really put a lot of thought into this, huh? We figured we were going to ask you later. Horror scratched the side of his skull with a shy grin.
That actually sounds like fun,
said Killer, surprised by the well-thought-out plan. Very well, I have some paperwork to finish. Cross, can you let everyone know we won't be available for the evening? We'll leave in a few hours. Yes, sir. The knight gave a salute before heading to the lift. Although Dust didn't have anything else to say, Nightmare sensed not only was he pleased, he was growing excited for the evening's coming events.